Welcome to Instructional Design Strategies in Higher Education, How EdTech and Institutions Can Work Together. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Abigail Blakely, and I'm a Senior Product Marketing Manager at Stukent. I'm thrilled to be here with you all today. As we begin, as people start filing into the event, I want to encourage you to use the chat feature. It's on the right side of your screen. Go ahead and start by sharing where you're tuning in from. I'm coming from the Stukent HQ in Idaho Falls. If you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to type them into this chat. I just want to get you familiar with it. We'll have our presenters and moderators will help to answer your questions either in real time or save them for an open Q&A at the end. We have Jen and Heather, Darcy from WSU Pullman. Nice to see you. Got a couple of Washington people here today. Awesome. Gonna have a great audience today. So while we're waiting, I just wanted to make you aware of some additional webinars that we're going to be hosting in the next month or two. Some of our upcoming sessions include From Campus to Career, what sales employers are looking for, and we're actually going to have somebody from LinkedIn speaking in that session. Then we also have one for AI for the future, equipping students for tomorrow's workforce. Really looking forward to that one. Be sure to click the link at the bottom of your screen. You can learn more and register for any of those upcoming, or we have some on-demand event options as well. If you can't stick around for all of today's session, don't worry. We will be sending out the recording afterwards. And we will be having a Q&A session at the end of the discussion. And hopefully this goes without saying, but please be respectful and polite when commenting today. As a special little gift for everyone attending, we want to offer you free instructor access to our courseware and Simternships. Our courseware includes a fully digital, annually updated curriculum that comes with comprehensive instructional resources such as lesson plans, embedded videos, auto-graded quizzes, and more. Paired with our innovative Simternships, students get hands-on experience in professional roles, allowing them to master marketable skills, receive immediate feedback, and explore real-world scenarios in a low-risk environment. These resources not only enhance student engagement, but also significantly reduce your preparation and grading time. Stukent provides course materials and Simternships in the accounting, business, communication, and marketing spaces. So go ahead and click the link below to request your free instructor access. To show those again, some of our titles we have available for you. Coming soon is project management. We're hoping that one will be available very shortly, actually, for use in your spring semester. If we have anybody coming from our accounting session, we just had one about an hour and a half ago. Welcome back. We talked a lot there about the really amazing Simternship and courseware and all the incredible resources that our authors put into these courseware. They typically come from a background of education and industry, so a very dynamic product. While you're taking a second to request access, let me introduce and welcome our panelists to the stage. Anne Michelle started at Stukent in 2023, establishing the company's official instructional design practice. Her EdTech career began at Houghton Mifflin Harcourt and continued with 15 years as an instructional designer at Pearson. She has a Bachelor of Science in Journalism from Boston University and a Master of Educational Technology from Boise State University. Next, we have Casey Wilhelm. He's a co-author and lead content architect, teaches management information systems, computer systems, and business applications, and some other business courses at the University of Idaho. His research interests include adult learning, instructional design in digital environments, and cognitive information processing. Casey has various degrees, including an MBA, MIT, and MS in adult and organizational learning. Before working in higher education, he held management positions in the insurance and wine and hospitality industry. Lastly, we have Dr. McCabe. She sees both the academic and practical sides of marketing education with a unique perspective and experience. She is co-author of Mobile Marketing Essentials and has been a professor of marketing for more than a decade. She currently teaches at Point Loma Nazarene University in San Diego. Dr. McCabe founded a marketing agency focused on media and advertising for Hispanic marketing. Her background in curriculum development began in the mid-1990s with courseware for the University of California, San Diego Extension, San Diego State University, and the University of San Diego before running a marketing program at National University. There, she developed program, course, and weekly learning outcomes for more than 24 courses in both graduate and undergrad programs. She now lives in San Diego, California, and goes by Dr. Mary Travel Best for her podcast and travel book series. Thank you all for joining us today, and I'll pass over the time to our panelists.
Thank you, Abby. All right, I'm going to get our deck shared and just start out by saying what really gave us the idea for having this panel today is that at Stukent, we understand that for instructors, there can be a big gap between what is demanded of you by your institution in terms of curriculum design and then the actual training that you receive in the topic of learning design. So we wanted to explore some of the paths that we can take to close those gaps, whether it is through further education, through self-study, through support from publishers such as us at Stukent, or any number of ways. So to start out with, we need to talk about what is instructional design. I was just sharing with everyone before the meeting that I get asked this question a lot, and I pretty much freeze up every time because I know that people understand instruction and what teachers do, and then what instructional design is and how that happens in the background is less familiar to those outside of education. So the formal definition is that instructional design is the process by which instructional materials and the learning experiences are designed, developed, and delivered. So I practice instructional design by title. That is what I do. I've done that for Stukent, for Pearson, for Houghton Mifflin. I want to hear from Mary Beth and Casey about how you, in the course of your career, got involved in some instructional design practice. So Casey, you're on my left, so let's start with you.
So my involvement into higher ed was a little bit different. As kind of stated, I was in the management positions and then decided I wanted to teach. Really enjoyed going to school. And so when I was kind of after my MBA, I really wanted to kind of focus on, if I was going to teach in higher ed, kind of learning some of the strategies of how people learn. What I found throughout kind of this journey is that a lot of training doesn't occur on behalf of a lot of people in higher ed that are teaching. Oftentimes, you get your PhD, you jump right into teaching. There's not really a lot of formal training or even informal training on kind of these methods and things. And so my path was really wanting to learn about instructional design and then find out how it could be advantageous for me as a professor to really engage students by creating some holistic understanding of what makes them tick and then designing kind of strategies around those to hopefully increase persistence.
So if you'd like me to chime in on here, what is instructional design and how did I get involved in it?
Yes, thank you.
Recall when you first came to me and asked me if I would be on this panel, I was a little bit reluctant because I don't really consider myself an instructional designer per se, but then I listened a little bit more and I considered that I could offer some value to some other people who are in my situation, who are business people at first, who want to teach the current and relevant materials and don't have any specific training in designing courses. And so through practice and failure, and then improving, and then continuous improvement, we have all learned how to close the loop to make sure that students are getting what they're supposed to be getting from those educational opportunities. So it really gives me a chance to kind of be on the side of a little bit reluctant, but happy to be here and happy to share. Maybe there's some other people in the room who feel the same way as I did, that maybe I didn't have any instruction and I have learned way.
Yeah, and I just put up a poll so that we can kind of, that I'm hoping people can see, that we can get kind of a pulse check in terms of what paths everyone else is in the midst of here. And just to kind of build off of what you were saying, Mary Beth, one of the reasons that I did find your perspective so valuable when I was thinking about what people we wanted to involve, part of my history is that my mother is a lifelong professor. She taught physical therapy and related anatomy topics, and that was really her whole career. So she was a 40-year instructor and at no point had formal training in education. And I think to this day, she would call herself an educator over a physical therapist. So I think there are certainly quicker paths we can take than learning over the course of 40 years. And that's kind of one of the things we want to get into. So Casey, you started your education in instructional design kind of before you even got into the business education aspect. What were some learning design principles that really kind of captured your attention and got you excited about being an educator?
Yeah, I think for me, a lot of the research that I've conducted and continue to do really focuses on looking at kind of the generational cohorts of how these different cohorts are learning. So by cohorts, I break them down as many do, and it happens in marketing as well, right? We're looking at millennial, Gen Z, and now Gen Alpha coming up. And so to me, it was really relevant in having an understanding of what these generational cohorts look like from not only a demographic perspective, but then also like from learning styles, traits, behaviors, because they exhibit really unique traits amongst these three groups of what we have. So when you think of millennials, right, you're thinking 1981 to 1996 roughly. When I think of millennial learners, I really look at kind of these 5 areas or kind of qualifiers of what really makes them tick. Thinking of like relevance, rationale, a relaxed kind of atmosphere, creating a rapport and kind of research-based methods are kind of the 5 things that we really kind of focus on with millennials. And now in higher ed, right, we kind of think of them as kind of the non-traditional students, right? I mean, many of them a little bit older, have careers, maybe have prior careers, they have families, right? There's a lot of different constraints. So when you look at designing curriculum, right, we gotta look at that kind of those different variables of how we design. Then you kind of look at the, jumping into like Gen Z, so think of 97 to 2012 roughly, right, with them, right, really much more of a personalized kind of learning, right? They're the iPhone generation. They've all grown up with an iPhone being involved. We continue to see kind of diminishment of attention spans amongst all these cohorts, and it's even getting worse with Gen Alpha. And so, okay, so we take that into account. We look at Gen Alpha, for example, so 2012 to 2024, right? This idea of hyperconnectivity, right? Very visually driven. So if you kind of amalgamate all these together, it can be really challenging from an instructional design standpoint. Like, how do I design something that can meet all these diverse needs that are out there? And it may seem daunting, but it definitely can be done. I think it's just a little bit of attention to detail of, incorporating little nuggets that each one of these groups can identify with. And there are some commonalities amongst them too, but for me, it's really just having this kind of hyper awareness of what makes these generational cohorts tick, and then how you can design strategies based on them. And by designing strategy, I mean, it's kind of a debate that I have with someone. We kind of talk about this as well. There's kind of this premise, well, they need to learn how I learned, right? They need to read, they need to do it my way. And it's like, well, I don't disagree with you, right? I mean, I wish they would read the way that I did, but fundamentally there's some blocks that they can't do that the same. And so it's really just, hey, how can we kind of create an understanding around this? And when I actually share some of this research with my students, it's really fascinating. They've kind of helped guide it and confirm a lot of what I've kind of dug into. And they appreciate it, right? They like that you're at least trying to identify with them and have an understanding. So I think it's really been cool for me to kind of do some of that research, put it into practice, share it with the students to get feedback as well.
Yeah, that's great. Oh, and we're just getting Mary Beth back. Yay. Mary Beth, Casey was just talking about his research into generational cohorts and the idea that instructional design strategies can kind of give you direction on how to engage students where they're at in terms of their generational practice, interests, lifestyle, the ways that they learn that may be very different from the ways that we learned, even if it's ways we were forced to learn as opposed to preferred to learn. And I think what really makes that fascinating to me is the idea that that's one of the biggest benefits of a strategic practice, is that when you're instructing based on your content expertise, and maybe you didn't have the formal education in instructional strategies, the tendency can be to teach the way you were taught. And
Right.
that doesn't work so well for successive generations. Now, I know you were an incredibly early adopter of online learning, very early in the completely online, not even just blended, but fully virtual. So talk about some of the ways that you had to develop strategies to teach to a generation who is learning very differently from the way that you were taught.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Every generation comes with their own set of tools. Today's learners, many of them grew up with a mobile phone that was just part of the furniture. And the people who developed the courses didn't. So to them, the new ways of learning should be kind of like adapted along with technology, which is why the materials have changed, the way they're designed, the way they're delivered is very exciting to me as an innovator. So how every generation listens and how they learn is really fundamental to being successful. So fortunately, I have some younger children, actually. Now they're adults, but I could practice on them. For example, I could use my millennial children to kind of learn how to teach better, and even proofread some of my work. So I was using the next generation to say, does this make sense? Oftentimes, because I knew that I needed to up my game. I knew I needed to kind of learn a new way to learn and a new way to teach. So by being willing to step outside of my comfort zone and say, tell me what I can do better, I was able to adapt. And I'm still trying to do that. So I'm still in a constant changing. And the way I want to express this is, I call it backward design. So I would look at what outcomes I want to have accomplished, and then I would create basically categories, and then I would work backwards to create whatever course learning outcomes we could look from. So it's kind of like a way to look in the rear view mirror as far as how would you like to address that by backward design.
Yeah, and I think the combination of what you both just talked about are two of the main pillars of instructional design, which is, Casey, understanding your learners, understanding their motivations, where they're coming from, how they prefer to interact with content, and then starting with your learning objectives and figuring out what strategies your learners would respond to in terms of achieving that learning objective. And then the third part is really understanding the context in which they're learning. So do both of you teach both online and in person?
Yeah, so I teach online, hybrid, and face-to-face.
So I teach all of those, yes. And I came during COVID, I was teaching all online. And even before COVID, I was using Zoom exclusively for my teaching, but I was supervising faculty who were teaching in person as well as online with the same course materials. And that became a challenge. So during COVID, I switched over to Point Loma, Nazarene University, and I have both in-person classes and I also have online classes. So I have the combination of the two.
And for both of you, what's your process like in terms of shifting your strategies based on that context? So whether you're online or blended or whether you're in person, is that something you have practiced to the point where you can do it pretty automatically? Do you seek support from instructional design resources at your university?
I can answer
for
that.
me,
Oh,
you go ahead and go first. Yeah.
So last semester, spring, I taught integrated marketing and sales communications class Tuesday, Thursday mornings for one class. I taught another section on Monday nights, and I taught a third section in an 8-week class online. So during that same semester, I had 3 different sets of instructional, shall you say, journeys to go on. Because if you're meeting twice a week, or if you're meeting once a week, it's kind of a different course. And if you're teaching online in an 8-week, you really are redesigning it kind of as you go. You pick up clues along the way to see how you can do it better next time. And I think that's what's going to help me out. After you've taught it once or twice, then you've got the hang of it. Sometimes the first time you teach a class, it can be a big challenge. Would you agree with that, Casey?
In fact, I'm embarking on a new journey at the University of Idaho, and whereby I'm going to have to, be teaching a new set of classes, new student demographic. And to your point, 100%, I'm very transparent with them. I will be. And hey, this is my first semester here. I've designed this, fully plan on re-engineering it if I have to. So, and they appreciate that transparency when you're transparent with them and just let them know, look, I'm doing my best. I'm aware of these things, but it may not be perfect. So please bear with me, have a little patience. And they're really super cool about that normally. And for me, I want to echo the point of, this is kind of a continual process that it's not like once you design something, you can just kind of set it and forget it for a few years. It's something that I at least continually reevaluate kind of at the midpoint. So what I do with my students at the midpoint and at the end of the semester, I do it 3 times, at the beginning, midpoint, and end. I basically give them opportunities to provide feedback to let me know what they think they're doing well, what they think I'm doing well, what they can improve on, and what they think I can improve on. And they're pretty good about giving you some feedback, and they appreciate that. Certainly when you think of like the Gen Zs and millennials, they like that ability to provide feedback in kind of a safe environment. And so I give them those opportunities and then use that feedback to kind of look at, okay, what can I readjust strategies and what can I do different? Kind of to the original point of, looking at different instruction between like online, face-to-face, and hybrid environments. To me, I really look at it as the population that's taken a face-to-face class, their motivations for wanting to take face-to-face are often different than those that want to take an online class. And so understanding that, motivations for face-to-face of how you design things, right? They want that interaction with you. They want that interaction with their peers. If you look at most online students, right, they're wanting less interaction, more self-motivated, right? So you have to look at kind of think of the motivations behind why the students are doing it, and then design strategies kind of around those is at least how I've done it.
Yeah, and really what you're both getting to is the idea that instructional design, learning design, it is iterative. So there should be those feedback cycles, just like we try to do for learners, where informative learning, it's not going to be learning if they don't get the feedback, respond to it, try again. And we're doing the same thing as learning designers. And as Casey said, it's not a one-time thing because the students are changing, the technologies are changing. So I'm wondering, to that point, because that's come up a lot, is the idea that students' interests, students' ways of learning are shifting along with the technologies that they're interested in, not to mention the technologies that support the instruction that you deliver. So do you think you have to be an early adopter or have an early adopter mindset to be a strong learning designer? Casey, why don't you start?
To me, no. I mean, I think you just have to have a willingness to at least start looking. And to me, it's like if you tried to jump into instructional design like all at once, kind of like an early adopter, right? I'm just going to jump right in. It's new technology. I'll teach myself as I go. I don't care about making mistakes and things. I'm fine with it. I think if you look at instructional design, I mean, you got to do little bits and pieces, right? Kind of find some strategies to kind of dig into and then apply those. Like if you try to do it all at once, it could almost be overwhelming. And so to me, no, I don't think you have to be an early adopter. I think you just have to have a willingness to understand that, are my goals to have persistence and engagement within the classroom? Do I want them to have long-term recall and be successful? And of course, everybody here wants their students to be successful and they want engagement and persistence. So if that's the case, and most professors want that, then it's just a matter of, okay, now let me start small. Let me look at some different areas of where I might be able to begin. So no, I don't think you've got to be a full-on early adopter. I think just a willingness to kind of start to look at some of these different strategies and having some awareness is where it's key.
Yeah, Mary Beth, go ahead.
I think the key ideal person is somebody who's adaptable. I think that's the key word we're looking for here. Yes. So if you have an ability to adapt with the circumstances that are changing, whether they be the technology, the students, the health, the things that have been going on in the environment, we have to adapt to that. And if we can, I think we're going to be much more successful.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think one of the great things is that a lot of the research-based strategies, whether or not you're unconsciously using them through years of practice or whether you've studied them, such as cognitive information processing, experiential learning, all of those kind of big strategies, the new technologies can fit into them. They all become ways to engage the students and get them more actively involved in the construction of their knowledge. And of course, the big one that's out there now is AI, as we are all scrambling to figure out how do we use it in the classroom? How do we caution against the risks? And Mary Beth, you spoke about AI use in the classroom at ProfCon. So I'm interested in your perspective in how having an instructional design mindset can kind of help you adjust as these new technologies come along.
So I did speak at ProfCon. It was a great event. I encourage anybody in the room to attend in the future because it's a great learning experience just to be around other faculty. And I think, yes, I was on a panel, but every day we talked about this, not only in the session itself. Critical thinking are the skills that are most needed by our collegiate and higher education. So I think those skills are not, able to be engineered very well when you are looking at just finding what a large language model will give you. You've got to be able to think about the outcomes you want to bring up as a student. So that critical thinking part is deeper learning. And AI, I think, is really good if you are not necessarily being too precise. So for the accounting professors in the room, AI may not be a tool that your students are learning because they know that perhaps they may not get the right answer. But with maybe communications classes and maybe business classes where there's more a chance to write your own thoughts, it can help you at the early stages. But when you're doing critical thinking or personal reflections, those are really where faculty could be guiding students to have a better understanding of learning. And I just want to mention there's a triangle effect. So I think we learn about a third from our peers. We learn about a third from our texts, and we learn about a third from our teachers. So there's that three-way looking at how we are learning. So we're learning from lots of different directions.
I love that. Yeah. And then Casey, how much are you using AI in your classes?
Well, I'm actually, I guess I was kind of an early adopter of trying to at least in, inject some AI coverage into my classes. Um, I'm a technology author. That's what I write into is in management information systems. And so, I was doing some early research on it and understanding. And then I also was looking at how it was being used in industry as well. And so I'm much the same of wanting to foster critical thinking and wanting them to teach them and teach themselves about responsible use of it. So I get pretty in depth into the ethical side of it, looking at the ethics behind the use of it, how to use it, not to totally replace critical thinking, but to supplement it. So teaching them strategies of proper prompt creation, looking at checking of references, making sure that the data is clean, that what they're getting. And so running them through a series of different assignments that really start with the ethics piece and then get them to look at the conclusion of it. How would it be applied in their field of study, for example? So how would it be applied in marketing? How are we seeing it applied in areas like finance, accounting, and getting them to dig in because industry is expecting it. And if you look at some of the statistics on the industry side, they're expecting these students to be coming in having some knowledge about it. Most of them are deficient in their own minds that they don't have the skills that they need. And so industry is saying, hey, we want this, we're incorporating it more, but we're kind of hesitant in higher ed now because definitely kind of an interesting dance between, replacing critical thinking, having students just submit that work versus getting them to use the tool, more as it should be intended. So, I'm still much like kind of this discussion. I'm still trying to figure out what's the best way to do this. And I'm just finding, the more as it comes out and we see the large language models get better, I think it's really just teaching them one, hey, it's no different than traditional plagiarism fundamentally, right? I mean, if you're cutting and pasting, it's not your own work. I can read it now and find if it's a prompt's been generated. It's pretty quick once I see you nodding too. Once you read through enough, you can spot it very, very quickly. The hard thing is once you do spot it, it's very, very difficult to prove. So for me, it's just, creating awareness like, hey, I'm kind of thinking you're doing this. I kind of think you shouldn't. So if you are, just stop. And if you're not, just be advised. And 90% of the time it's, oh no, I wasn't doing that. I just looked up things and I must have, okay, oh, fair enough. I think once you kind of, give them a little warning about it, it tends to be good. But it's definitely evolving in how we can do it. And I think it'll continue to evolve, especially when we look at more centered tools based on the disciplines that we teach in.
Yeah. And one of the topics that has been going around Stukent quite a lot is this idea of where is appropriate use within the learning cycle where you're maximizing that critical thinking as opposed to inhibiting it. So if they have the ability to engineer a really great prompt because they fully understand the objective of the assignment and what the output needs to look like and what tone they're aiming for, then that's a really strong skill they're exercising in being able to prompt it in a way that it creates a great output. And then if they can edit it from there, then that's something we've talked a lot about. Is like, how do you get students to actually review their own work as opposed to just do a quick draft and then hand it in because they're done.
Yeah, because prompt creation in itself is a critical thinking skill if they do it right. I mean, because like you're saying, to write a well-engineered prompt to get the output that you want, or write the prompt, continue to evolve it to get what you need, that takes a fair amount of understanding and critical thinking to know, okay, well, the output I got wasn't quite where I wanted it to be, right? So you have to have some understanding around it. So yeah, it's really interesting.
And another cool opportunity is that, to your point earlier, Casey, about being transparent with your students about things you're still figuring out, like AI, if you can have these conversations with them about where is the opportunity to use critical thinking in combination with AI, then you're increasing students what we call metacognition. So their own understanding of how they learn. And the more you can increase that, the more they're going to be connected to their learning experience and have that relevance. So really, really interesting, cool opportunities there. Amazing how quickly it's changing. So to that point, go for a nice transition here. As things change so quickly, what type of support do you seek out from your institution in terms of developing new learning design strategies or figuring out integration of new technologies. Where do you go, Mary Beth, in your university?
Well, as we were talking about AI, I can jump back to that for a second. So in our syllabus, we want to make sure that students have expectations set. So my university supplies me with some possible wording for the syllabus for potential and best use of AI. And I can use it or not. So they've given me examples of things I can use in my syllabus. And I also talk to other professors about what they're putting in their syllabus from other universities so that I can share that also with my university. So I can see, and I know that there are committees that are developing the right wording for that too. So it's not just one discipline. It's kind of across the university. So I'm always looking for the best use of the wording without being too long about it, but to give some examples of here's how you should cite it. And then also trying to improve not just the AI portion, but also trying to learn through the centers for teaching and learning that are available to try to maximize the time that it takes to set up a course and to actually, yesterday I learned how to cross list a course through Canvas, which I hadn't done before. So there's lots of ways that my university is training me, including an onboarding 3-day session before I even joined the faculty, to try to maximize the value for the students based on where I can go for help. And that to me says I'm supported in every way. So I really appreciate that there are those resources available for me.
I love to hear that. And Casey, I know you've talked about a resource at your school where they have instructional designers and technologists who can help the faculty. Is that something that you leverage or send your colleagues to?
So, I mean, we at University of Idaho, there's a Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning, and they cover the whole gamut from help with kind of our discussion like we had with how best to integrate in AI, what's the university stance on it, what's the departmental stances, like what are some best tips and practices that they've seen, all the way to like full course audits within Canvas if you want them to look through, the learning management systems, how are things designed. At my prior institution, I went through Quality Matters training just because I thought it'd be interesting to see, what's the process. It's a process for sure, but it was very eye-opening to look at some of the best practices, designing a course that way. And it's kind of an interesting outcome from this was we basically designed at my prior institution and at University of Idaho as well within the department I'm teaching in of having a consistent look and feel of the learning management system from an instructional design standpoint so that the same button surface, the same welcome pages, right? It's got this consistent feel of where students are going just so we don't lose them in the navigation kind of circle where they can get lost in things. And so we really collaborated to do that at my prior institution and we found really positive outcomes. So I think a lot of it is, for me, it was seeking out those resources that are available, finding other colleagues that might be able to share some of their insights as well. And then seeking out, what's available, because there's great discussions like this, other things that you can spend 45 minutes, you might get a few really cool nuggets that you decide, hey, I'm going to move forward with. So I think a lot of it is just having open eyes and kind of, saying, look, I'm going to commit, a couple hours this week to look and find some information about some things and maybe try to incorporate that in. And the good thing is, a lot of universities and colleges now are starting to have these, centers for teaching and excellence or, similar kind of things, but they're still underutilized quite a bit. And I don't know that most professors really realize like the benefits. I don't think they see like how advantageous it could be to take advantage of it. So I would definitely, that's my recommendation is, look at outside resources, but see what's available at your institutions too.
I love it. And I love that there is increasing support for instructors. And of course, as the person who oversees instructional design at Stukent, I have to bring it around to what would you love to see from curriculum providers in terms of offering support to instructors in the execution of the materials that they are using from us?
Well, I can say that I've been an author for Stukent for 10 years. And my textbook, Mobile Marketing Essentials, if I can plug it,
Absolutely.
has used course learning outcomes before we even were required to in our course materials. So we were innovating and developing those without even being asked to. So we were kind of on the forefront of kind of guiding you. And one of the things that you've done really well lately that are helping us as authors, which I think is going to help students and faculty eventually, is by providing a robust feedback channel. So you're talking to professors who are teaching our courseware. You're gathering information and you're feeding it back to us so that we can provide great relevance for the next edition, of which I'm working on right now on a weekly basis, so that we can, again, I'll say close the loop, because we want to make sure that the gaps are filled. And sometimes as an author, you don't know where the gaps are yet. So when you start looking at gaps, then you fill those with help from our team and professors who are also teaching the material. It's a good feeling to say we're doing the right things here, and continue to do so. So more feedback is even requested if that's possible.
It is, and it is underway. At the same time that we started the instructional design practice at Stukent, we introduced the portfolio team, and they are really responsible for getting that feedback. If you see the surveys in your email, like, fill them out. We are really using that information, including we have our new defined E3 learning experience that will be more publicly releasing soon. And part of the process I went through in developing that was doing a gap analysis. Where are we with our curriculum now? What do we want it to be? And then what types of things do we need to fill those gaps? And what we're hearing from each of you in the market is really influencing our decision in how we fill those gaps. Casey, what are your thoughts in publisher provided curricula?
Yeah, I think that number one is really ask what resources are available from the publishers that you use, and find out, because oftentimes they may have a lot of assistance that they can provide. You just need to ask for it oftentimes. I know myself as an author, I get pretty hands-on with a lot of our users. And we also have what we call faculty consultants as well. And those faculty consultants are like users that basically can go out and say, look, here's how I design my course using my materials. Here's how I set it up. Here's different modalities of it and things like that. So you've got somebody who's already using it, who's kind of sharing their experiences with you. And maybe you can they can look at what you're designing and how best approaches are. And I know me as an author, I do that as well. We'll actually jump in and look at, okay, well, here's what your objectives are for your course. Here's the outcomes. Let's look at how we could use the materials and kind of plug those into match. And so to me, there's a lot of really valuable information. I know I worked with Stukent when I was adopting the principles of marketing curriculum. And I had great assistance from them that helped me with, looking at kind of the strategies of it. What are the video cases? What are the different elements of it? The simulations, what's the best practice for deploying the simulations, all the way through to integration as well. And so Stukent did an awesome job with me and really made it easy, because I know it's daunting if you're looking, especially if you're a first-time adopter of something, of, oh my gosh, there's so many things to do. And Stukent did an awesome job of helping me out to make, kind of lighten the load a little bit, make me feel much more comfortable with kind of that move over. And I agree 100% with the feedback cycle as well of working with a publisher who wants to hear from their users. Find out how things are going, because that's the only way you can continue to improve a learning solution, is based on that feedback. So I think it's really, really highly critical to have a publisher who really seeks that engagement from their users.
Yeah, love to hear it. And I'm a career-long instructional designer, but I'm not in the classroom. So for me, there's nothing more valuable than, if I can't see it being implemented in, like, literally going to a classroom and watching it, then to hear the feedback from you about what's useful, what is burdensome, what can be made more efficient, what can be made more helpful or to the students. All of that is just gold for us. So we love to hear it. Abby, do we have any questions coming in that we can address from the audience?
I don't have any yet from the audience, but I do have a couple that I thought it would be great to get some expanded perspective on. So you guys have a lot of experience with instructional design. Obviously, we have a couple of people in the poll that said that they don't have much. They've pursued it professionally or done some self-education. But what are some key competencies that faculty members should develop to better collaborate with instructional designers or their course designers?
Mary Beth, do you want to tackle that first? Oh, you muted instead of unmuted.
You. Thanks. I think being a good listener. So that's it. I muted so that I could be a good listener, but now I'm back on. To try to see where success is for them. If you can find, if you're a faculty member and you're about to go to talk to an instructional designer, maybe ask them what's success for them? What does success for them mean? Because they probably don't know what you do or how you are working on your assessments at your university, because that's a whole department that just sounds like taxes, right? I mean, it just sounds onerous for many people, but it's an important part. And so to try to find out if you're going for help, yes, you want help, but you also want to help the person who's giving that help. And so that it can kind of be a good two-way street. I hope that makes sense.
I think it does. Yeah. I've always seen instructional designers working with a subject matter expert or supporting an instructor. It's very much collaborative and goes both ways, and it is not a linear process. So to be able to have that be a back and forth conversation, I think is a strong, strong approach. Casey, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's kind of two things for me. I think one is, talk with an instruction designer to kind of find out what's some of the buzzwords and lingo, and what are some of the key terms and design strategies that an instructional designer uses, just to have some understanding, so that when you're trying to design your own, you can kind of go back and go, okay, well, this is coming from the instructional design world. We're looking at universal design strategies or learning styles and traits, these different things, so that as you do it, it can be proven and kind of intended of how you're applying. Because I think that's important, certainly when you go in front of students or other faculty too, of saying, look, I designed it based on these strategies because the instructional design team kind of gave me some of this information of this is best practices of how they use it. So I think that's really a critical competency. And I think the other one is just willing to take some chances. I think, I don't want to say risk taking, but understanding that, hey, I'm willing to try something new. I'm willing to adapt to strategies. So kind of being flexible and having this flexible mindset of, I know it's not going to be perfect the first time, nor will it likely ever be, but I'm going to keep trying to hit the target best. And I think that definitely is going to be reflected in your courses if you're trying to do that continual improvement, just having kind of those open eyes, like I said, willing to just try a little bit of different things within the class and do some tweaks. I think it's really important.
Yeah, I agree. I think that willingness to play and experiment with what's new is a really important competency, because there's always going to be something new. And if you have that hesitancy to try it out and experiment and see where it may be a great tool and where it may not be the right choice, that's kind of the analysis that an instructional designer does. And that's a really strong practice.
Yeah, and I had a dean who was very supportive of, I'd much rather you take some chances and try to redesign some things rather than just stick with the status quo. She's like, if you're continually doing this, I'll fully support that, even if maybe the outcomes aren't the best, but that's how we're going to get better at teaching. And then we can share those strategies within the department of, oh, hey, I tried this, it didn't quite work as intended. And once again, I think the transparency with the students of, hey, I'm trying to make this better, and this is a process. They're pretty forgiving. And in my evaluations, they pinpoint those evaluations a lot. The ability for them to provide feedback at multiple points. And then at the end, they're like, it wasn't perfect, but you know what? I really appreciated the effort that was being put forth of trying to make it better. So the forgiveness always seems to be there because, you're being upfront with them. So I think it is important.
And again, that parallels the experiential learning practice that we try to follow at Stukent, where we are making great effort to leave more room for students to fail and to learn from that failure. And we need to be doing the same thing. I love that they're supporting you on that. Abby, I'm seeing a lot of questions about AI policy. Is that?
Yes. Yes. So Allie asks if you could articulate a little bit more about your personal policies on AI in the classroom. If you could elaborate on what you allow and what you don't in completing assignments and writing term papers.
So I can talk to that. I don't, so when I see something that a student turns in that doesn't look like they wrote it, I will respond by saying, this does not sound human, because I want to get their take on whether or not they actually agree or not. So maybe it gives them a chance to reflect back and say, I need to up my game a little bit here. I need to review what I've turned in. I need to process what I'm really trying to do, whether it's, just turning in an assignment or doing something that's copying and pasting. Now, I'll also say this, there are a lot of false positives. So that means a teacher might think that it's AI created, but it's not. And so we walk that line that Casey was just talking about, of trying to identify how to help a student learn by not, there's something about, calling them out, which you really have to kind of watch. And then I know some students were afraid to even use AI. So they're afraid of just the dark side, that they've heard some stories. So my policy is I encourage it. I teach them how to use tools. I go in the classroom with an open attitude and say, let's try these things together. Let's try to see what we can learn from that. I appreciate you all trying to do something new and innovative. And if we can apply that innovation into our learning, that's a win. But make sure that you are human. Make sure that you are using your skills and being critical thinkers when you do present your work. So hopefully that is helpful, and also source it and cite it.
Yes. Casey, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree 100% on that. Wanting them to be, the human aspect. I think the citations are critically important so that they can check the data they're getting, making sure that when they're actually referencing that it's there. That kind of helps clean it up a little bit. If they're just cut and pasting from AI, and then I'm like, hey, I want to make sure that you have some footnotes in there that are, directly correlated to wherever this was pulled from. That kind of helps to replace that ability to just cut and paste, because it's not, they don't know how to prompt it to do that. I mean, I do, but I don't tell them. I don't share the secret sauce there. Some of them figured it out, but additionally, what I've done too is I like to have them do video posts as well. So maybe I'll have them do a written assignment, and then I'll pivot them to do a video, kind of answering questions, much like how they would if they were doing an essay. And basically, I tell them one of the grading criteria is if you're reading from a script, you're going to lose 25% off the get-go. Because I want them, even if they're using AI, right? I mean, if all they did was use AI, all they're going to be able to do is read that script, because they never really thought about it or assimilated it. So I incorporate more kind of video elements into, especially my online classes. And in my face-to-face classes, it's very similar, right? It's like, get together. I'm going to have you just do, a quick debrief with your group. I kind of float around. I want you to talk about this article in your, in your own words, kind of ideas. And then in my online with those videos. And I found by doing that, even if I suspect they're doing a little bit of too much AI over here, it's really hard to fake it when they get into those video type formats to be able to, articulate thoughts without looking down at their notes and doing that. And so, it's just a strategy I've kind of used, because I'm much like you. I'm kind of all in on trying to get them to use AI. I'm not scared of it. I know they're going to, here's the thing, even if I don't, have them use it in my class, we all know they're going to. I mean, I talked with an English professor, and she's like, I'm not even going to introduce it to them, because, if I do that, then they're going to use it. I'm like, you're foolish to think they're not doing it already. So I'm like, why don't you think of some strategies in an English context? So I worked with her. We created an assignment where she had students basically create a prompt. And then they went through and using kind of, the conventions of English, dissected what was wrong and what looked good. And so now she kind of got over that early adopter kind of stress and was like, oh, I see how I could use this advantageous. And so it's just interesting to look at different strategies. Really goes back to that whole being open to collaboration piece.
Yeah, and I really like the idea of requiring students to critique outputs, really
Yep.
put them through the exercise of identifying bad tone, identifying cliche use, if they could actually like point out a hallucination if that happened. Because the more they're familiar with the drawbacks or, the things that can go wrong, the more they're likely to take that critical thinking step to really review the output and make sure that they're not handing in these cliche-ridden, weird tone, poorly researched things. And I like the idea of adding that collaboration to it, because when you turn it into a conversation, it's really hard to plagiarize in the middle of a conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they have to have thought about it, right, in order to articulate it via video, right? I mean, if they can't just read it, right, you have to be able to have thoughts, much like we're doing today. I mean, we're not going off scripts because we've experienced this, we know it, and it's not going to be a really fantastic presentation for the most part. I mean, it's a little clunky here and there, but I'm okay with that, right? At least they're kind of thinking about it in different ways, and so that kind of fear of, well, they're not going to critically think. You just have to look different ways to get them to do it.
Love it.
I love the idea, Casey, of doing a video. That's great. It's a good tool. And then also you can have students in class, you can say, let's do this assignment using AI. And maybe you're making a digital ad. And then everybody, okay, now let's fix it up to improve it. So what would you do better now on your own human tools? Mm-hmm. And then when they look back and they see the before and the after, they realize how valuable they are able to think through how to improve something.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I love all of your policies and the things that you've learned and experienced with AI and how you're modifying your classroom. We've had some good discussion in the chat as well around that. If you are interested in discussing more about that, we're going to have that AI webinar, I believe, next month going on with Christina Kalberg, talking about why it's great for preparing them for the workforce. So they're probably going to talk a lot about like what we discussed here of making them familiar with the platforms has those positives, and it also helps you kind of control what goes on in your classroom, guiding them. So that,
if I'm wrong, but Christina actually contributed to the AI policy that you follow, Mary Beth, right?
That's correct. We have these discussions. We're working on curriculum together right now to try to improve our student learning. So yeah, she and I are on the same team.
Awesome. Yeah, and there's that pop-up again for our events. And they'll probably talk about some awesome AI resources that Stukent has put together for some of our customers who are looking to be early adopters and incorporate AI into the classroom. It's a great resource. So that's all the time we have for today. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. As a reminder, don't forget to request your free instructor access to our courseware and Simternships. As we just talked about, we host lots of virtual events throughout the year. If you're looking to partner with educators to share new insights for business, marketing, or communication topics, feel free to apply to speak with Stukent. We're always looking for engaged and knowledgeable professors looking to share what they've learned and that we can all grow from. So there should be a link popping up on your screen to apply to speak with Stukent. Thank you again to our presenters and Michelle, Casey, and Mary Beth for doing this with us today. It was a really great session. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today and your participation in the chat. We'll see you again.
Thank you, everyone.